Marcus said it like he was ordering coffee. Casual, already decided. She gets nothing. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was talking to Gerald Pruitt, the estate attorney seated at the head of Grandpa's dining table, the same oak table where our grandfather had eaten breakfast every morning for 41 years. Marcus had his ankle crossed over his knee, leaning back in his chair, scrolling something on his phone with his thumb while he spoke. Dad made his wishes clear before he passed, Marcus continued. The house, the land, the accounts, it goes to me. I'm the one who carried the family name. I'm the one who gave him grandchildren. Nora walked away. Gerald Pruitt adjusted his glasses and opened his mouth, but Marcus kept going. She moved 4 states away, built her little career, showed up twice a year for holidays. She doesn't get to waltz in here and collect a check because she shares DNA. My sister-in-law Valerie was sitting beside Marcus, nodding along like she was watching a sermon she agreed with. Their 2 boys, 13 and 11, were in the next room playing on their tablets. The whole family had driven up from Charlotte that morning, suitcases already in the guest rooms upstairs as if moving in was a formality. My name is Nora Jeffries. I'm 44 years old. I'm a civil engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers, stationed out of the Vicksburg District Office. I've spent 19 years designing flood control systems, levee rehabilitation projects, and dam safety assessments across the lower Mississippi. I say this not because my resume matters right now, but because my brother just described me as someone who walked away, and the truth is so far from that, it sits in a completely different zip code. Gerald Pruitt waited until Marcus finished. He was patient. I'd later learn he'd been Grandpa's attorney for over 20 years, and patience was something Grandpa had specifically valued in him. Mr. Jeffries, Gerald said, I appreciate your perspective. However, I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to execute the last will and testament of Donald Raymond Jeffries, deceased October 9th. The document I have was signed and notarized on March 14th of this year, 7 months before your father's death. Marcus stopped scrolling. March? He said. No. Dad updated his will in 2019. I was there. He told me everything was structured for me. There was a 2019 will, Gerald confirmed. It was superseded. The room got tight. Not silent, Valerie's chair creaked. Marcus shifted forward. The grandfather clock in the hallway kept ticking its heavy, reliable rhythm. But the air between us compressed. Superseded by what? Marcus asked. Gerald opened his briefcase and removed a manila envelope. It was thick, sealed with red wax, something Grandpa had done with every important document since his days as a county clerk. He had a brass stamp with his initials, D.R.J., and he pressed it into wax the way other men signed their names. Your father came to my office on March 14th, Gerald said. He was of sound mind. Dr. Eleanor Choi performed a cognitive evaluation 2 days prior at his request, specifically to preempt any challenge to this document. The results are included. He also recorded a video statement which I'm prepared to play. Marcus's jaw worked side to side. I recognized the motion. He did it when he was calculating. What does the new will say? Marcus asked. Gerald looked at me, then back at Marcus. Before I read it, your father asked me to read something else first. He reached into the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Cream-colored, handwritten in Grandpa's unmistakable block print. The kind of handwriting that belonged to a man who'd learned to write before ballpoint pens were common. This is a letter, Gerald said. Addressed to both of you. He titled it simply, The Truth About This Family. Gerald unfolded the letter carefully, holding it at the edges. Grandpa's handwriting was steady, even at 86. He'd had arthritis in his left hand, but wrote with his right, and his penmanship had survived intact, tight, deliberate, every letter formed with the precision of a man who believed sloppy writing reflected sloppy thinking. Gerald read aloud. Marcus and Nora, if Gerald is reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know I wrote this on a Tuesday morning after my second cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table. I'm not emotional, I'm not confused, I'm clearer now than I've been in years, because I've finally stopped pretending. Marcus, you're going to be angry. You've spent the last 5 years positioning yourself as my caretaker, my heir, my legacy. You brought the boys over on Sundays, you called every Wednesday, you mowed the lawn when it got tall. And I appreciated all of it. I want you to know that. But I also want you to know that I saw what you were doing. I saw it when you convinced me to add your name to my checking account in 2021. For convenience, you said. I saw it when $14,200 disappeared in a single month and you told me it was a billing error. I saw it when you brought that contractor to the house to assess repairs, and he turned out to be a real estate appraiser. I saw it when you told your sister she wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving 2022, using my name, saying I didn't want her there. I never said that. I called Nora 2 days later and told her the truth, but by then she'd already bought a plane ticket home. You have been managing me, Marcus. And for a while I let you because I was tired and you were here and it was easier than fighting. Gerald paused. He looked up, checking the room. Marcus's face had gone a particular shade I'd seen only a few times in our lives. Not red exactly, but mottled, like blood was rushing to places it couldn't decide on. Valerie had stopped nodding. She was staring at the table. I wasn't gloating. I need to say that clearly. Hearing Grandpa's words read aloud by a lawyer in a room that still smelled like his pipe tobacco, a blend called Presbyterian mixture he'd ordered from the same shop in Virginia for 30 years, wasn't satisfying. It was devastating, because it meant he'd been aware, he'd been watching, he'd been alone in this house, knowing his grandson was picking his pockets, and he'd carried that quietly for years. Keep reading, Marcus said. His voice had flattened. Gerald continued. Nora, I owe you an apology. I let your brother push you to the margins. Every time you called and Marcus answered my phone and told you I was sleeping, I wasn't sleeping. He'd put the phone on silent. I found out because I checked the call log one afternoon while he was in the yard. 11 missed calls from you in September 2022 alone. 11! My throat hurt. I pressed my thumbnail into the side of my index finger, a habit I'd developed in the Army Corps whenever I needed to stay composed during a briefing that was going sideways. I started keeping records in January 2023. Gerald helped me set up a separate bank account at a different institution. I moved the important things slowly so Marcus wouldn't notice. By the time you read this, the following assets are no longer in any account Marcus has access to. Gerald set down the letter and picked up a second document, a typed asset summary. Your grandfather's estate, as of the date of death, consists of the following, Gerald said. The primary residence at 4712 Bowman Mill Road, appraised at $487,000. 46 acres of adjacent agricultural land, appraised at $1,240,000. A brokerage account with Vanguard containing $312,600 in index funds. A savings account at First Republic, holding $94,300. A life insurance policy through USAA with a death benefit of $250,000. Personal property, including the contents of this home, 2 vehicles, and a coin collection appraised at $38,000. Marcus was doing math. I could see it happening behind his eyes. Total estate value, Gerald said, approximately $2.42 million. Marcus straightened in his chair. Fine, read the will. I will, Gerald said. But your father's letter has another page. Gerald turned to the second page. Marcus, I know about the LLC. I know you formed Jeffries Heritage Holdings in August 2022. I know you listed yourself as sole member. I know you told the tax assessor's office you were managing my property on my behalf and requested the agricultural exemption paperwork be sent to your address in Charlotte instead of mine. I know because Gerald pulled the filings for me. You were trying to build a paper trail that made it look like you were already managing the estate, so that when I died, there'd be minimal friction. You could point to years of involvement and claim continuity. Smart. Genuinely smart. You get that from your mother's side. But I didn't sign anything. You forged my signature on the LLC operating agreement. Gerald has the original and he's had a handwriting analyst compare it. The report is in the envelope. I could have confronted you while I was alive. I chose not to. Partly because I was afraid you have a temper, Marcus, and I'm old. Partly because I wanted to handle this in a way you couldn't talk your way out of. You've always been able to talk your way out of things. You talked your mother into giving you the down payment for your first house. You talked Nora's ex-husband into lending you money for your business. And when the business failed, you convinced everyone it was Nora's fault for not investing alongside her husband. The marriage survived, by the way, barely, but Nora never knew you were the reason Tom almost left her. I actually turned to look at the wall. Not at Marcus. Not at the lawyer. At the wall. Because that detail, that sentence about Tom, rearranged something I'd carried for 6 years. Tom and I had hit a rough patch in 2020. He'd made a $40,000 loan to Marcus for a landscaping franchise that went under within 8 months. When the money was gone, Tom didn't tell me directly. I found out from our accountant during tax season. The fight wasn't about the money, it was about the secrecy. Tom said Marcus had asked him to keep it quiet because I'd overreact. I spent 2 years in couples therapy working through trust issues that I now realized my brother had manufactured. Tom and I were still together. We'd rebuilt. But knowing Marcus had specifically engineered the secrecy, had deliberately created a wedge between husband and wife that wasn't old pain reopening. That was new information landing on scar tissue. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said. He pushed back from the table. "This is a senile old man being manipulated by his lawyer. Gerald, if you had any involvement in influencing my father's testamentary decisions, that's undue influence, and I will have this entire will thrown out." Gerald didn't flinch. "Mr. Jeffries, your father anticipated that objection. That's why Dr. Choi's evaluation exists. That's why the video exists. And that's why the forensic handwriting analysis of the forged signature exists. I'd encourage you to sit down." "Or what?" "Or I'll note for the record that you left voluntarily before the reading was complete and will proceed without you." Valerie tugged Marcus's sleeve. He sat. Gerald picked up the letter again. "Now here's what I've decided. Nora, the house is yours. You were born in the upstairs bedroom. You helped me replace the roof in 2014, took a week of leave and spent it up on a ladder in August heat. You planted the magnolia in the front yard when you were 9. This house knows you. The 46 acres, I'm splitting them. 23 acres go to Nora outright. 23 acres go into a trust for Marcus's boys, Noah and Caleb, managed by Gerald until they turn 25. Marcus cannot access, sell, lease, or encumber any portion of that land. The boys get it when they're old enough to decide for themselves. The brokerage account goes to Nora. The savings account goes to Noah and Caleb's education fund. The life insurance goes to Nora. The coin collection goes to the Bowman County Historical Society. They've been asking about it for years, and I'd rather it educate the public than sit in a safe. Marcus, I left you the 2 vehicles. The 2019 Ford F-150 and the 1987 Chevrolet C10. The C10 needs a water pump. You'll figure it out. I know this will feel like punishment. Maybe it is. But it's also protection. I'm protecting my grandchildren from their father's financial instincts. I'm protecting my land from becoming a subdivision. And I'm protecting Nora from one more year of being erased from this family. Gerald folded the letter. He placed it on the table between us like evidence, which, in a way, it was. Marcus's breathing had changed. Shallow, quick. His eyes were moving fast, scanning the room as if looking for someone who'd agree with him. "He wasn't competent," Marcus said. "March of this year he was already declining. I'll get medical records. I'll get testimony from his neighbors." "His neighbors," Gerald said, "have already provided sworn affidavits that your father was sharp, independent, and managing his own affairs until August, when his health declined rapidly. Mrs. Alma Fredrickson next door states that your father drove himself to church every Sunday, balanced his own checkbook, and beat her at Scrabble 3 days before he signed this will." Marcus looked at me for the first time since Gerald had started reading. "You did this," he said. "You got to him." I hadn't spoken a single word since we'd sat down. I met his stare and kept my hands flat on the table. "I didn't know about any of this, Marcus. I'm hearing it for the first time, same as you. Liar. Believe what you want." Gerald cleared his throat. "There's also the video." Gerald produced a laptop from his briefcase, a newer model, which struck me as odd until I realized Grandpa must have gone to Gerald's office to record this. The video file was dated March 14th, same as the will. He turned the screen to face both of us and pressed play. Grandpa sat in a leather chair I recognized as Gerald's office furniture. He wore his good flannel, the green and navy one he saved for town trips. His hair was combed, his eyes were bright and focused, and he looked directly into the camera with the kind of deliberate attention that left no room for claims of confusion. "I'm Donald Raymond Jeffries," he said. "I'm 86. Today is March 14th. I'm sitting in the law office of Gerald Pruitt in Bowman, where I've come of my own free will to record this statement and sign my updated last will and testament." He paused, took a breath. Not a labored breath, a thoughtful one. 2 days ago, Dr. Eleanor Choi gave me a full cognitive workup at the VA Medical Center. She tested my memory, my reasoning, my judgment. She said I scored in the normal range for a man my age, and in some areas above it. I asked her to write that down and sign it. She did. He leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, if you're watching this, you're probably already planning your legal strategy. Let me save you some time. I've been planning mine for 14 months. Gerald and I have documented everything. The unauthorized withdrawals from my checking account. We have bank statements with your debit card number attached to transactions I never approved. The forged operating agreement, we have the original, the analysis, and the filings you submitted to the Secretary of State's office. The real estate appraiser you brought to my home under false pretenses. His name is Dale Kirkwood, and he was quite cooperative when Gerald contacted him." Grandpa sat back. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you left me no choice. When a man spends his entire life building something, working tobacco fields at 14, clerking for the county at 19, buying his first 10 acres at 26, raising 2 children after their mother passed, he doesn't hand it over to someone who sees him as an obstacle." His voice caught on that last word. Just slightly, just enough. "Nora, sweetheart, I'm sorry I wasn't braver while I was alive. You deserved a grandfather who picked up the phone. You deserved better than an old man who let his grandson run interference because confrontation exhausted him. I watched you build your career from nothing. I kept every article the Vicksburg Post ran about the levee project you led after the 2019 floods. I have them in a folder in my desk drawer top right." I pressed my thumb into my finger so hard the nail left a crescent. "The house is yours, because you earned it not with money, but with love that didn't have conditions attached. Take care of the magnolia, it's older than you think." He looked into the camera for a long, still moment. "That's all I have to say. Gerald, you can turn it off now." The screen went black. The clock in the hallway struck 4. 4 heavy, brass-tongued chimes that rolled through the house like the building itself was exhaling. Marcus stood up. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the same floor Grandpa had refinished himself in 1998 with a rented sander and 3 weekends of labor. "I'm contesting this," Marcus said. "Every word of it. The will, the letter, the video, the so-called forensic analysis. I'll have my own experts. I'll have my own doctor evaluate the cognitive test. I'll take this to probate and drag it out for years if I have to." Gerald closed the laptop. "That's your right. But I should mention one additional detail your father asked me to share, in the event you chose to contest." "What?" "The forged signature on the LLC operating agreement. Filing a forged document with a state agency is a Class H felony in North Carolina. Your father chose not to report it during his lifetime. His instructions to me were conditional. If you accept the terms of the will and do not contest, the matter stays private. If you contest, I'm authorized to forward the handwriting analysis and supporting documentation to the district attorney's office in Mecklenburg County." Marcus's face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds: fury, calculation, and something that looked almost like fear. Valerie stood up beside him. "We need to talk to our own lawyer," she said. It was the first complete sentence she'd spoken all afternoon. "Of course," Gerald said. "I'll be here." They walked out of the dining room. I heard the front door open and close. Through the window, I could see them standing by their Lexus in the driveway. Marcus pacing, Valerie with her arms crossed. Gerald began organizing his documents back into the briefcase. Did he really plan all of this? I asked. Gerald looked up. There was something in his expression that wasn't strictly professional, something closer to admiration. Your grandfather, he said, spent 14 months preparing for this moment. He came to my office 11 times. He organized every bank statement, every call log, and every piece of evidence into labeled folders. He cross-referenced dates. He anticipated every argument Marcus might make and prepared a counter for each one. He snapped the briefcase shut. In 22 years of practicing estate law, I've never had a client that thorough. Marcus and Valerie didn't come back inside. They drove away at 4:20 that afternoon, gravel popping under their tires. I stood in the kitchen and watched through the window over the sink, the same window where Grandpa used to stand while he waited for his morning coffee to brew. The view hadn't changed. The long slope of the front yard, the gravel drive lined with crepe myrtles, the road beyond curving toward town. My phone rang at 6:45 that evening. Not Marcus. My cousin, Dana, who lived in Asheville. Marcus just called my mom, Dana said. He told her your grandfather was manipulated by his attorney into disinheriting him. He said you've been secretly visiting Grandpa for months, poisoning him against Marcus. He said you forged documents. I sat down on Grandpa's porch swing. The chains creaked. None of that is true, Dana. I figured. But you should know he's already working the family. He called Aunt Patrice, Uncle Lou, my mom, and apparently your cousin Greg in Knoxville. He's building a narrative. This was Marcus's pattern. When confronted with evidence, he didn't address the evidence. He changed the arena. Moved the fight from the courtroom to the family group chat. Transform a legal matter into a loyalty test. Make it so that by the time anyone examined the actual facts, they'd already chosen sides based on emotion. I called Tom. He was back in Vicksburg with our daughter Lily, who was 17 and in the middle of her junior year. I told him everything. The letter, the video, the will, the detail about the $40,000 loan. There was a long pause. He told me you'd leave me if you found out, Tom said quietly. He said you'd see it as financial betrayal and you'd file for divorce. He was very specific about that. He described how you'd react, the words you'd use. It felt like he knew you. He does know me, I said. That's what makes him effective. Nora, I should have told you from the start. I've regretted it every single... I know, we already survived this. I'm not reopening it, but I want you to understand what we're dealing with now, because he's going to call you next. Marcus called Tom 40 minutes later. Tom didn't answer. Marcus left a voicemail that Tom forwarded to me, Marcus's voice smooth and concerned, saying he was worried about Nora's mental state and suggesting that grief can make people do things they wouldn't normally do. By morning, I had 7 text messages from various family members. 3 were sympathetic, 2 were confused, 2 were openly hostile. Aunt Patrice's read, "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. Marcus gave everything for that man." I didn't respond to any of them, not yet. Instead, I called Gerald Pruitt at 8:15 a.m. Gerald, I need copies of everything. The will, the letter, the cognitive evaluation, the bank records, the forged LLC documents, the handwriting analysis, all of it. I can have a complete packet ready by noon, he said. Are you preparing for a contest? I'm preparing for my brother. The formal contest notice arrived 9 days later. Marcus had retained an attorney named Clifton Wade out of a Charlotte firm that specialized in estate litigation. The filing alleged undue influence, diminished testamentary capacity, and suspicious circumstances surrounding the decedent's relationship with his attorney. I'd expected it. What I hadn't expected was what came with it. Clifton Wade's office had filed an emergency motion to freeze all estate assets pending the outcome of the contest. If granted, it would mean no one could access the house, the land, the accounts, anything until the case resolved. Estate litigation in North Carolina could take 18 months to 3 years. Gerald called me the afternoon the motion was filed. They're also requesting a court-appointed administrator to replace me as executor, he said. The argument is that I'm conflicted because your grandfather's letter references me as an active participant in the estate restructuring. Is that a legitimate argument? It's not frivolous. A judge might entertain it. I've already consulted with a litigation colleague, Sandra Felton, sharp probate litigator out of Raleigh. She's agreed to represent you if it goes to a hearing. When? The freeze motion is scheduled for November 12th, 3 weeks. I drove back to Bowman from Vicksburg that weekend, 8 hours on I-20, then north through Alabama and into the Carolina foothills. I let myself into Grandpa's house with the key he'd given me years ago, the same key I'd had since I was 19, the one Marcus apparently didn't know about because he'd changed the locks 2 years ago. What he didn't know was that Grandpa had given me a copy of the new key, too. The house was cold. October in the foothills meant the furnace should have been running, but someone had turned off the thermostat. I checked the breaker box, everything was on. The thermostat itself had been manually set to off. Marcus had been here between the reading and the contest filing. He'd left signs. The guest bedroom sheets were rumpled. There were takeout containers from a barbecue joint in Bowman in the kitchen trash, and a stack of papers on Grandpa's desk had been rifled through. The desk drawer top right, where Grandpa said he'd kept the articles about my levy project, was empty. He'd taken them. Something about that out of everything, that specific theft, made my hands shake. Not the money, not the land, not the legal threats, the newspaper clippings. My grandfather had collected them quietly, privately, a folder of evidence that he'd been paying attention, and Marcus had taken them, probably thrown them away, because they contradicted his story that Grandpa and I were estranged. I called Gerald from the kitchen. Marcus has been in the house. He removed personal items, including documents my grandfather referenced in his letter. Was there forced entry? No, he must still have a key. I'll draft a cease and desist. The house is part of the estate, and under the current will, no beneficiary should be accessing or removing property before distribution. If the freeze goes through, it applies to him, too. I spent that evening going through Grandpa's office methodically. He'd been organized obsessively so. File cabinets labeled by year, tax returns going back to 1979, property surveys, equipment receipts, and in the bottom drawer of the cabinet closest to the window, a folder labeled simply Marcus. Inside were photocopies. Every piece of evidence Grandpa had referenced in his letter: the bank statements, the LLC filings, the call logs he'd made duplicates and kept them here. The originals were with Gerald. But Grandpa, being Grandpa, had created a backup. There was also something Gerald hadn't mentioned. A handwritten ledger 3 pages long, documenting cash withdrawals Marcus had made using Grandpa's debit card between January 2021 and December 2022. The total was $47,800. Each entry included the date, amount, ATM location, and a brief note. Marcus took card while I was at Dr. Patel's appointment. Marcus used card at Costco. I was home. Marcus withdrew $3,200, told me he was depositing a check for me. $47,800, stolen from an 84-year-old man in increments small enough to avoid triggering bank alerts. I photographed every page. The freeze hearing took place on November 12th in Bowman County Courthouse, a brick building with portraits of county judges lining the second-floor hallway. Sandra Felton met me outside at 8:30 a.m. She was in her early 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, and she carried a single leather binder that somehow contained everything she needed. Their argument is straightforward, Sandra told me as we walked in. They'll claim Gerald influenced your grandfather. They'll point to Gerald's active role in gathering evidence against Marcus as proof that he exceeded his duties as an attorney and crossed into advocacy. They'll question the cognitive evaluation and argue it was arranged to rubber stamp a predetermined outcome. And our argument? Dr. Choi's evaluation speaks for itself, the video speaks for itself, and the forged LLC document speaks for itself. We're not just defending the will, we're demonstrating why your grandfather felt compelled to change it. The courtroom was small. Marcus sat at the opposing table with Clifton Wade, who was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s, well-dressed, the kind of attorney who'd practiced long enough to be competent, but not long enough to have seen everything. Judge Patricia Rourke presided. She'd been on the bench for 16 years and had a reputation for efficiency and low tolerance for theatrics. Clifton Wade presented first. He was polished, I'll give him that. He framed Marcus as a devoted grandson who'd sacrificed his time, his weekends, his family's resources to care for an aging patriarch. He described Gerald as an attorney who'd overstepped, who'd become an active co-conspirator in restructuring the estate to benefit one heir over another. He argued the cognitive test was performative, arranged by Gerald specifically to insulate the new will from challenge. It was a clean narrative. Selective, but clean. Sandra stood. She didn't rush. Your Honor, I'd like to address the question of Mr. Pruitt's alleged undue influence by presenting the evidence that prompted Mr. Jeffries Sr. to seek new counsel arrangements in the first place. She opened her binder. Exhibit A, bank statements from Mr. Jeffries Sr.'s primary checking account, showing $47,800 in unauthorized withdrawals between January 2021 and December 2022, all traceable to a debit card in Marcus Jeffries' possession. Exhibit B, the operating agreement for Jeffries Heritage Holdings LLC, filed with the North Carolina Secretary of State, bearing a signature purporting to be Donald Jeffries's. Exhibit C, a forensic handwriting analysis by Dr. Liam Beckett, a court-recognized expert with 31 years of experience, concluding with high confidence that the signature is not genuine. Clifton Wade objected. Your Honor, these documents are not relevant to the question of testamentary capacity or undue influence on the will. Judge Rourke looked at him over her glasses. Counselor, the petitioner has alleged that the decedent's attorney exerted undue influence. The respondent is entitled to demonstrate the decedent's independent motivation for changing his estate plan. Overruled, Sandra continued. Exhibit D, the video statement of Donald Jeffries, recorded on March 14th in Mr. Pruitt's office. I'd like to play it for the court. The video ran for 4 minutes and 12 seconds on a monitor wheeled in by the court clerk. Grandpa's voice filled the room, steady, precise, undeniable. When it ended, Judge Rourke made a note on her pad. She didn't look up for several seconds. Exhibit E, Sandra said. The cognitive evaluation by Dr. Eleanor Choi, board-certified neuropsychologist with the VA Medical Center. Her report concludes that Mr. Jeffries demonstrated intact executive function, intact memory, intact judgment, and full understanding of his assets, his family relationships, and the consequences of his testamentary decisions. She closed the binder. Your Honor, Donald Jeffries didn't change his will because his attorney told him to. He changed his will because his grandson was stealing from him, forging his name, and systematically isolating him from his granddaughter. The evidence isn't ambiguous, Mr. Jeffries Sr. prepared for this challenge the way he did everything methodically, thoroughly, and with full awareness that his grandson would fight it. Judge Rourke denied the freeze motion from the bench. She also denied the request to remove Gerald as executor. The court finds no credible evidence of undue influence, she said. The decedent's capacity is well documented, his motivations are clear, and his estate plan is internally consistent. The petitioner is free to continue the contest through standard probate proceedings, but the emergency relief requested is not warranted. Marcus walked out of the courthouse without speaking. Valerie followed. Clifton Wade packed his briefcase slowly, the way people do when they're recalculating. Outside, Sandra turned to me on the courthouse steps. He can still contest through regular probate, but his best arguments just failed in front of the judge, who will likely hear the full case. If his attorney is smart, he'll advise settlement. And if Marcus isn't smart? Sandra almost smiled. Then we proceed, and the forged LLC document becomes a much bigger part of the conversation. Marcus's attorney called Gerald on December 3rd. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Clifton Wade proposed that Marcus receive the house in exchange for dropping the contest. Gerald said no. Wade proposed a 50-50 split of all liquid assets. Gerald said no. Wade proposed that the land trust for the boys be dissolved and placed under Marcus's management. Gerald said no. On December 9th, Wade called again. This time he proposed that Marcus receive $50,000 from the estate in exchange for dropping all claims. Gerald called me. "It's your decision," he said. "The will gives Marcus the two vehicles' total value, maybe $35,000 for the F-150 and $12,000 for the restored C-10, though the C-10 needs work. Adding $50,000 would bring him to roughly $97,000 out of a $2.4 million estate." What did Grandpa want? He wanted the will enforced as written, but he also told me, and this was off the record, in a conversation at his kitchen table, that if Marcus showed any willingness to back down, I should consider it a victory. I thought about it for 2 days. I talked to Tom, I talked to Lily, who was old enough and perceptive enough to understand the dynamics even if she didn't know every detail. I sat on Grandpa's porch and watched the light move across the 46 acres that sloped down toward Bowman Creek, land he'd bought one parcel at a time over 4 decades. I called Gerald on December 11th. "No settlement. The will stands as written. Marcus gets the trucks. If he drops the contest, the LLC forgery stays private. If he doesn't, we proceed, and the documentation goes to the DA." Marcus dropped the contest on December 19th. His attorney filed the withdrawal on the same day, and the court noted it the following morning. I never got a phone call from Marcus. No apology, no acknowledgement, nothing. But I did get a call from Valerie. It came on January 7th, after the holidays, at 9:30 on a weekday morning when I assumed Marcus was at work. "I'm not calling to argue," she said. Her voice was measured, the voice of a woman who'd rehearsed what she was going to say. "I want you to know that Noah and Caleb ask about their great-grandfather. They loved him, and I want to make sure the land trust that they'll actually receive it." "When they're 25, I said. "Managed by Gerald until then. That's what Grandpa wanted." "Okay," a pause. He's not handling this well, but the boys shouldn't pay for that." "The boys aren't paying for anything. Grandpa made sure of that." Another pause. "He really kept a ledger?" "He did." "I didn't know about the money, Nora. I need you to believe that." I wasn't sure I did, but I also wasn't sure I didn't. Valerie had always existed in Marcus's shadow, present but peripheral, agreeable but perhaps not fully informed. Whether that was genuine ignorance or strategic distance, I couldn't say. "I believe you didn't know about the forgery," I said. That was the most honest thing I could offer her. She thanked me and hung up. I moved into the house in February after Lily finished her semester exams and Tom arranged a transfer to the Army Corps District Office in Wilmington. A longer commute, but manageable. We kept the Vicksburg house as a rental. The Bowman property needed work. The gutters were failing, the furnace was 23 years old, and the barn roof leaked in 3 places. I hired a contractor from Bowman, not Dale Kirkwood, and started repairs. On our first Saturday morning in the house, I opened Grandpa's desk. The top right drawer was still empty where Marcus had cleaned it out. But underneath the drawer liner, something Grandpa had clearly anticipated someone might overlook. There was a second folder. Thinner. 3 newspaper clippings inside, plus a handwritten note. "Nora, I figured Marcus might take the originals. I saved these 3 because they were my favorites. The one about the Yazoo Basin Levee rehabilitation quotes you calling it the most important infrastructure work happening in America right now. I read that to Alma next door and she said, 'That girl's got her grandfather's stubbornness.' She wasn't wrong. I'm proud of you. I should have said it more when my mouth still worked. Love, Grandpa." The clippings were yellowed and carefully cut. He'd underlined my name in each one with a ruler and a red pen, perfectly straight lines, the way he did everything. I put them in a new frame and hung them in the hallway. Next to his portrait from the county clerk's office, a young man in a too-wide tie, staring at the camera with the same steady expression he'd had in the video 8 months later. Tom found me standing there that evening looking at both frames. "You okay?" he asked. "He planned everything," I said. "Down to the backup clippings under the drawer liner." "He knew his family. He knew his grandson." Tom put his arm around me. The house settled around us the way old houses do, creaking, breathing, adjusting to new weight. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because families contain people who take, and people who give, and people who watch. Grandpa spent his last years watching, and when he'd seen enough, he picked up a pen, drove to his lawyer's office, and built a case so thorough that his own grandson couldn't dismantle it from a courtroom. He couldn't protect himself from Marcus while he was alive, but he could protect everything else: the land, the house, the grandchildren, and the daughter who never stopped calling, even when no one picked up. If your family has someone like Marcus, someone who confuses proximity with entitlement, who mistakes presence for ownership, pay attention, document everything, and find yourself a Gerald. If this story reminded you of something in your own family, I'd genuinely like to hear about it. Share your experience in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are carrying something similar. And if this is the kind of story that speaks to you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.